Okay, hi there. Welcome to another in our series of exam walkthroughs. We take a topic and a question and walk through a possible answer. Not a perfect answer, but hopefully we give you an example of how to structure and mix up the analysis and the evaluation. At any point during the video, just press the pause button whenever you want to think about the question, how you might answer it, or if you want to take a screenshot of a particular aspect of my suggested answer. We'll recommend some pauses as we go through. First of all, let's take a moment just to look at the extracts. There are two, and this question is to do with tourism, hospitality, transport, and the whole issue of whether a cut in VAT would be the right government policy to help this sector, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. So extract one, there has been a long-running campaign by the tourism sector lobbying for the government to cut VAT below 20% on things like hotels, restaurants, pubs, to boost employment and sales, which would in turn generate growth in the wider economy. I'm sure you'll know that VAT is an indirect tax charged on most goods and services, and businesses must register if their turnover is above £85,000 a year. VAT is forecast actually to raise nearly £130 billion in 21-22, and in fact it's the third biggest source of tax revenue for the government. And here's extract two. Again, whenever you're ready, just take a moment, press the pause button if you want to have a quick read through the extract yourself or take a screenshot. 2019, the hospitality sector contributed nearly £60 billion to the GDP. That's 3% of GDP. 2.4 million jobs. That's 7% of total employment. But the output in the sector was down, as you would expect, by 90% in the spring of 2020 during the first lockdown. Output recovered, boosted by Eat Out to Help Out scheme that Rishi Sunak launched, the discount scheme. But again, output dropped sharply as the new restrictions and lockdown came in September, and also again, of course, in January. There's already been a 6% fall in employment in the sector, but employment is being held up a little bit by the government's job retention scheme. So there we go, two extracts on the hospitality sector. Now here's our walkthrough, our question. Using the extracts, your own knowledge and an appropriate analysis diagram, assess the view that the UK government should reduce VAT, value-added tax, for transport and hospitality businesses. So it's a 10-mark question. I'm going to walk through an Edexcel answer, which would have 6 KA marks. KA stands for knowledge, application and analysis, and 4 evaluation marks. But if you're taking a different exam board, you might want to think about a question which would have a slightly different mark allocation, but also crucially what you'd include in your answer. So there's the question. Again, this is a moment to press the pause button and have a think, well, what might I put in the answer? Go back to the two extracts that we've just been through. Extract 1 on VAT and extract 2 on the industry. Assess the view that the UK government should reduce VAT for these kind of businesses. Okay, let me walk you through my suggested answer. It's not perfect, but it's just an example of a walkthrough. I'm going to build 2 knowledge application analysis points in support of VAT being cut. And my evaluation will be to challenge that twice, say, well, actually there's some counter arguments. Maybe VAT is not the policy to use. So here's my first paragraph. One argument in favour of cutting VAT, so it's always good to just refer to the question to anchor your answer, is that cutting VAT will reduce costs and therefore help them achieve higher profits, particularly after the industry struggled during the pandemic. Application here, extract 2, says that output in the UK hospitality sector fell 90% during the first lockdown and remains below pre-pandemic levels. My analysis diagram, we'll come to that in a second, shows how a cut in VAT causes a pivotal outward shift in the supply curve, which, ceteris paribus, other factors remaining the same, then leads to a fall in prices and an expansion of demand. So a chain of reasoning. In theory, this will then lead to higher revenues for hospitality businesses and help to reduce the losses made during the pandemic. So cutting VAT is a way of cutting their costs, increasing their revenues and generating higher profits. Now, using the diagram, I think the key thing here, the key point of advice I would give is to just develop the diagram a little bit. Clearly what the exams will be looking for here is recognition that VAT is an ad valorem tax, a percentage tax, and therefore a tax which is percentage doesn't cause a parallel shift in supply. It causes a change in the gradient, because obviously at higher prices 20% of £50 is more than 20% of £5. So what I've done in this diagram here is, if you can see, is I've shown how a fall in VAT would cause a pivotal outward shift in supply. Let's say we cut VAT from 20% to 5%. I'm just going to bring that in there, put a little arrow in there. So that's the cut in VAT. And of course, I've also shown supply with no VAT. So this will be a supply curve here with no tax. And I've drawn the various prices and quantities that you would expect to see for this situation. Again, crucially, I've drawn it as fairly elastic here. I'm suggesting that the demand for things like hospitality and hotels and restaurants is fairly price sensitive, and you could build that into your analysis. That's a perfectly good diagram. I mean, if you wanted to go absolutely to town, you could show the tax revenues, but keep in mind it's only a 10-mark question, and therefore as long as you're showing a diagram, that's key. The crucial point is VAT is a percentage tax. So if you were to go from 20% to 0, then you'd be moving from there to there, effectively. There we go. If you went from 20% just to 15% to 5%, you're moving from there to there. So it depends on whether you get rid of the tax or you just reduce it. So my argument was that cutting tax would increase demand and increase revenues for businesses. Well, now my next paragraph will be an evaluation paragraph. However, the impact of a cut in VAT on sales, revenues and profits depends on depends on the coefficient of price elasticity of demand. A lot of students say it depends on elasticity. It's far better to say it depends on the coefficient of price elasticity of demand. It's a fuller, more accurate answer. If demand has a low PED, for example, let's say minus 0.2, then a 15% cut in VAT would only have a relatively small impact on demand, perhaps leaving hospitality businesses with excess capacity, and even perhaps less total revenue. If demand is inelastic, you may get less revenue. And opening after the pandemic, of course, will increase their cost. They'll have to take some or all of their staff off the government's furlough scheme. So it's not guaranteed that a cut in VAT will be enough to return some of these businesses to profitability. So my evaluation is here that it depends on the elasticity of demand, so coefficient of elasticity, and of course the ceteris paribus assumption can be dropped. Costs might go up as well. My second point is about jobs. So my second argument, notice how I'm flagging this up. So I'm just at the start of the answer. I'm just going to highlight this for you. I'll colour it blue for the sake of argument. What I'm doing here is I'm just making it really clear to the examiner that this is my second analysis point. And I'm going back to the question. So a second argument in support of a cut in VAT is that the industry is labour intensive, which it is. That means there's a lot of labour relative to capital. Okay, and the tax cut is needed to protect hundreds of thousands of jobs. Go back to the extracts. The sector accounts for 7% of employment and pays 2.4 million people. And many of these are young people in their first job. And developing the point, unless the industry is supported, they may suffer a loss in expected lifetime income if they lose their jobs, which in the long run will cause a drain on government tax revenues. Lower VAT for businesses will allow hospitality sectors to spend more of their money on improving people's human capital through extra training, and this can boost the long-term competitiveness of the economy. So really my argument here is that cutting VAT is all about protecting jobs and giving businesses more money to spend on worker training. And I think that's really thinking long-term incomes of young people trying to find their way in the labour market, and the ability of hospitality businesses to fund important training. Now, how would you evaluate that point? The key here really is to evaluate, if you can. So my final paragraph, and this is a nice phrase to use in evaluation, a counter-argument is. That's quite a nice phrase to use, just to reinforce the point that you're trying to evaluate. And the counter argument is that VAT is a big source of tax revenue, bit of application there, and cutting it for transport hospitality businesses would lead to an even higher fiscal deficit and growing national debt. So this is, if you're cutting VAT for a big sector, you're probably going to take a hit on tax revenues. And critics of cutting VAT might argue that there are better medium-term alternatives. Instead of just cutting VAT, perhaps bring down national insurance contributions, the cost of employing people, or much-needed reform of business rates in the retail sector, which are a big cost for many pubs and restaurants. Cutting VAT to simply boost corporate profits would be seen as a quick fix solution which risks causing government failure. So a little bit of government failure coming in here, arguing that just a simple tax cut would be a short-term solution. And the big risk, of course, is that you get a sort of policy myopia kicking in, and there's a potential risk of government failure, particularly if those big hospitality businesses and transport businesses that are actually quite, profitable and really don't need a cut in VAT to grow. Well, there we go. I have walked you through my answer. It's not a perfect answer, but I've tried there to build 2 analysis points and 2 evaluation points in alternating paragraphs. And I've whacked in a theory diagram because the question asked for it. Loads more walkthroughs coming ahead as we move towards assignments and exams. Huge thanks for joining in on this one. Take care of yourselves, everybody, and see you all soon.